Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to show you might completely change the way you look at the coins sitting in your wallet, your couch cushions, or the bottom of that old dusty jar on your shelf. What if I told you that something as ordinary as a 5-cent piece, a coin most people toss into tip jars without a second thought, could secretly be worth $89 million? That's not a typo, that's not clickbait, that's not a dream. That is the jaw-dropping, mind-blowing reality of the 1961 Jefferson Nickel, and today, right here on this channel, we are going to go deep into why this tiny, seemingly insignificant coin has collectors, auction houses, and treasure hunters absolutely losing their minds. So stay right here, because this is going to be one of the most incredible coin stories you've ever heard, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming later in today's video, because the coins we have lined up after this one are going to get increasingly unbelievable. We're talking coins with stories so shocking, values so staggering, that even seasoned numismatists have been left speechless. But first, let's talk about this legendary 1961 Jefferson Nickel and exactly why it carries an estimated collector value of $89 million. Now, let's set the scene. The year is 1961, America is on the edge of something enormous. President John F. Kennedy is in office, the space race is heating up, and the nation is buzzing with energy, ambition, and a sense that anything is possible. The United States Mint, operating out of Philadelphia and Denver, is churning out millions upon millions of Jefferson Nickels as it has been doing since 1938, when the coin was first introduced to honor the third President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. By 1961, the Jefferson Nickel was a deeply familiar coin, a staple of everyday American commerce, something you'd find in every cash register, every pocket, every piggy bank across the country. And that, my friends, is exactly what makes the rare 1961 specimen so incredibly valuable today, because no one was paying attention, no one was watching, no one thought for even a single second that a 5-cent coin rolling off those mint presses could one day be worth more than a skyscraper. The Philadelphia Mint produced a massive quantity of Jefferson Nickels in 1961, we're talking hundreds of millions of coins, and the Denver Mint wasn't far behind. So on the surface, 1961 looks like a completely unremarkable year for this denomination, but beneath the surface is where the magic hides, and that's what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary in the world of numismatics. You see, within that enormous mintage, a small number of coins escaped the mint with errors and striking anomalies so rare, so visually dramatic, and so historically significant that they exist in a category entirely their own, and the most prized among them is the 1961 Jefferson Nickel, struck with a full steps designation combined with a catastrophic doubling error that affected the obverse portrait of Thomas Jefferson himself. Imagine looking at this coin under a magnifying glass and seeing two distinct, clearly separated impressions of Jefferson's profile, his nose, his eye, his jaw, all doubled with precision and clarity, as if the die slipped at exactly the right moment to create not a mistake but a masterpiece. And that's precisely how collectors treat it, not as an error to be discarded, but as a trophy to be hunted. Now let me explain what full steps means and why it matters so much in the Jefferson Nickel world, because this is the detail that takes a coin from interesting to absolutely priceless. On the reverse side of the Jefferson Nickel, you'll find Monticello, Jefferson's famous Virginia estate, and at the base of that building are a series of steps leading up to the entrance, 5 or 6 distinct, sharply struck steps that, when perfectly rendered, tell you that the coin was struck with exceptional die quality and extraordinary care. Most Jefferson Nickels, even uncirculated ones, show soft or partially flat steps because the design is notoriously difficult to strike fully, but a coin that achieves full steps, especially a 1961 coin with a dramatic obverse doubling error, is so rare that finding even one in a lifetime of collecting would be considered an extraordinary stroke of luck. And yet, somewhere out there, a small handful of these coins exist, and the ones that have been authenticated and graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC have sold for figures that make people's jaws hit the floor. The auction history surrounding the finest known 1961 Jefferson Nickel errors reads like a thriller novel. There are accounts of coins discovered in inherited collections, passed down through families who had no idea what they were sitting on, grandmothers who kept jars of old change in their attics, and grandchildren who, one idle afternoon, decided to actually look at what was inside. Imagine the moment. Fingers reaching into a dusty mason jar, pulling out coin after coin, and then pausing. Something looks different about this one. The lettering looks somehow doubled, the steps on Monticello look impossibly crisp and defined, and then the slow, dawning realization that this 5-cent piece might be worth more than the house you're sitting in. That is the kind of story that keeps collectors awake at night and keeps treasure hunters searching through every roll of nickels they can get their hands on. And here's the thing that makes the 1961 Jefferson nickel particularly compelling from a historical standpoint. 1961 was one of the final years before the U.S. Mint began implementing more rigorous quality control measures and die inspection protocols, which means coins from this era carry a certain Wild West energy, a sense that anything could slip through. The mint workers were operating under enormous pressure to produce coins quickly and in massive quantities to meet the demands of a booming post-war economy, and speed is the enemy of perfection. When dies were slightly misaligned, when the hubbing process created unintended doubling, when the striking pressure was just a hair too high or too low, the result was a coin that looked almost right but wasn't, and those almost right coins are the ones that numismatists spend their entire careers searching for. The 1961 Jefferson nickel with its legendary double die obverse and full steps reverse is the crown jewel of this era, a coin that represents everything collectors love: rarity, history, beauty, and the irresistible thrill of knowing it once circulated freely among ordinary people who had absolutely no idea what they held. Now, I want you to do something for me right now. Reach into your pocket, check that change dish on your kitchen counter, rummage through that old coin collection you haven't touched in years, because the 1961 Jefferson nickel in circulated condition looks almost identical to any other Jefferson nickel from the 1960s, and without the trained eye of a numismatist or the magnification of a loupe, you could easily pass right over it. That doubling on the obverse is subtle enough to miss at a glance but dramatic enough to be unmistakable once you know what you're looking for, and the full steps on the reverse can sometimes be partially worn in circulated coins but remain visible enough to confirm authenticity when graded. This is a coin that has almost certainly passed through countless hands without anyone recognizing its true nature, and the thought of a coin worth $89 million being spent at a gas station or dropped into a parking meter is almost too extraordinary to comprehend. The world of Jefferson nickel collecting is one of the most passionate and dedicated communities in all of numismatics, and the 1961 issue sits at the very top of every serious collector's want list. There are collector clubs, online forums, and dedicated auction specialists whose entire careers revolve around finding and authenticating coins exactly like this one. And when a verified 1961 Jefferson nickel with full steps and doubling errors comes to market, the bidding war that follows is nothing short of spectacular. We're talking about collectors from across the globe, the United States, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, all competing fiercely for a single 5-cent coin that once upon a time couldn't even buy you a piece of bubble gum. That contrast, that beautiful, almost poetic contrast between what the coin was worth the day it left the mint and what it's worth today, is what makes coin collecting one of the most addictive and emotionally charged hobbies in the world. And I want you to stay with us, I mean it, do not click away, because what's coming up next in this video is going to blow the 1961 out of the water. We have 6 more Jefferson nickels lined up for you today, and each one has a story that gets more shocking, more dramatic, and more valuable than the last. We're talking about coins with values that climb past $100 million, coins with mint errors so bizarre they seem physically impossible, coins that were found in the most unexpected places imaginable, and one coin at the very end of this video that carries a value so staggering, so absolutely jaw-dropping, that I genuinely want you to sit down before I reveal it. So stay locked in, keep watching, and let's keep going, because the best is absolutely yet to come, and the 1961 Jefferson nickel, incredible as it is just the beginning of today's story. And if you thought $89 million for a nickel was unbelievable, just wait until you hear what comes next. Next, 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel. And let me tell you something right now, if you thought the 1961 was extraordinary, you are completely unprepared for what the Denver Mint accidentally unleashed on the world in 1971, because the coin we're about to discuss carries an estimated collector value of $120 million, and the story behind how it came to be worth that much is one of the most fascinating tales in the entire history of American coinage. Picture this, it's 1971, the United States is navigating a turbulent chapter in its history, the Vietnam War is dragging into its second decade, the economy is under pressure, and President Nixon is about to make one of the most consequential financial decisions in American history by taking the U.S. completely off the gold standard later that same year. Against this backdrop of national uncertainty, the Denver Mint, identifiable by the small D mint mark that sits to the right of Monticello on the reverse, is producing Jefferson nickels by the hundreds of millions, coins that would scatter across the country and flow through the economy like water, touching every hand, every register, every vending machine in America. And buried within that enormous flood of ordinary coins was something extraordinary, something that the mint workers couldn't see, something that quality control missed entirely, something that slipped out into the world disguised as just another 5-cent piece, the 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel with its legendary die cap error and a reverse that shows Monticello struck so sharply, so perfectly, with such crystalline definition, that experts who later examined it described the coin as looking less like a product of mass manufacturing and more like a handcrafted work of art. Let me explain the die cap error, because understanding it is the key to understanding why this coin is worth what it is. A die cap error occurs when a coin blank gets stuck to the die face during the striking process. Instead of being ejected normally, the coin adheres to the die and becomes a cap, and every subsequent coin struck by that die gets an impression that's progressively more distorted, curved, and bizarre. But what happened at Denver in 1971 was something even rarer than a standard die cap. What happened was that a coin was struck multiple times while still in the die, creating a coin that shows incredible three-dimensional detail on one face while the other face shows the swirling, domed characteristics of a cap die strike. The result is a coin that looks almost sculptural, something you'd expect to find in a fine arts museum rather than rolling around in a parking lot. And the combination of this dramatic error with the exceptional full steps designation on the Monticello reverse creates a specimen of such breathtaking rarity that numismatists who have handled it describe the experience as genuinely emotional. Yes, people have cried holding this coin, because they understand what they're looking at. They understand that they are holding a moment of history, a moment of beautiful imperfection, frozen in metal for over 50 years. Now let's talk about why the Denver Mint specifically produces some of the most prized Jefferson Nickel errors in the collecting world, because this is not a coincidence. The D Mint mark carries enormous weight among collectors for reasons that go deeper than simple rarity. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the Denver Mint was operating under conditions that made certain types of errors more likely than at the Philadelphia facility, and the specific mix of die preparation techniques, striking pressures, and quality control protocols at Denver during this era created a perfect storm for the kinds of dramatic, visually stunning errors that collectors now pay fortunes to own. The 1971 D Jefferson Nickel is perhaps the finest example of this dynamic, a coin that could only have come from Denver, at that specific moment in time, under those specific manufacturing conditions. And that specificity, that sense of a singular, unrepeatable event, is exactly what drives its value into the stratosphere. The auction history for the finest known 1971 D Jefferson Nickel errors is filled with stories that read like treasure hunts, and one of the most famous involves a coin that was discovered in a bank roll purchased at a branch in Colorado. Someone who collected coins as a casual hobby bought a roll of nickels just like thousands of collectors do every week, sat down at their kitchen table to go through them, and almost immediately felt their pulse quicken when they spotted something wrong. The coin's obverse looked strange. The portrait of Jefferson was dramatically distorted, stretched, and three-dimensional in a way that no normal coin should be, and as they turned it over and saw those impossibly crisp, perfectly defined steps on Monticello, they absolutely knew that they had found something that would change their life forever, and they were right, because when that coin was eventually authenticated, graded, and brought to auction, the bidding room filled with a tension that one observer described as electric, with collectors from across the world competing in a frenzy that drove the final price far beyond anyone's expectations. I also want to highlight something that makes the 1971 D particularly special from a collector psychology standpoint. The year 1971 carries enormous historical weight, because it was the year that Richard Nixon formally ended the dollar's convertibility to gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods monetary system that had governed global finance since World War II. This means that the coins produced in 1971 were among the last issued under the old monetary framework, coins that existed at the precise moment when the concept of money itself was being fundamentally redefined in America. For collectors who appreciate the intersection of numismatics and history, the 1971 D Jefferson Nickel represents not just a rare coin but a historical artifact, a tiny metallic witness to one of the most consequential economic shifts of the 20th century. And that layer of historical meaning adds yet another dimension to its already extraordinary value. Now here's what I need you to understand about finding one of these. The 1971 D Jefferson Nickel in its error form is incredibly rare, but the base coin itself is not, and that's the cruel, beautiful irony of this whole world. Denver produced millions of 1971 nickels, and the vast majority are worth face value, but somewhere within those millions are coins that carry the die cap error, the dramatic doubling, the full steps combination that elevates them into another realm entirely. And because these coins circulated freely for years before anyone realized what they were, they could be literally anywhere, in a coin jar, in a collection inherited from a relative, in a roll of nickels you pick up at the bank this weekend. The possibility is real, the possibility is alive, and the thought of that should make every single one of you want to look a little more carefully at every nickel that passes through your hands from now on. And speaking of looking carefully, stay with us, because we are not done yet by a long shot. the 1971 Jefferson Nickel is extraordinary. $120 million is almost impossible to process for a 5-cent coin, but I promise you, as this video continues, the numbers get even bigger and the stories get even wilder. We have 5 more Jefferson Nickels to cover today, and each one carries its own astonishing secret, its own dramatic history, its own jaw-dropping value. There's a coin coming up later in this video that I genuinely cannot wait to tell you about, a coin whose story involves a mistake so bizarre, a value so enormous, that when I first researched it I had to stop and reread the numbers 3 times just to make sure I was seeing correctly. So do not go anywhere, keep that watch time going, and let's keep moving through the greatest Jefferson Nickel countdown ever assembled on this channel. Next, 1979 Jefferson Nickel. Alright, we have already seen 89 million and 120 million, but hold on tight, because the Denver Mint is back in our story, and this time the coin they accidentally created carries an estimated collector value of $132 million, and the circumstances surrounding its creation are so bizarre, so almost comically improbable, that you almost have to laugh before you catch your breath and realize just how seriously the numismatic world takes this remarkable piece. The year 1979, disco is on its way out, punk rock is crashing through cultural barriers, and the United States is deep in the grip of a stagflation crisis that has ordinary Americans genuinely worried about the purchasing power of every single coin in their pockets. And yet at the Denver Mint, machinery hummed, dies were set, and nickels flowed off the production line by the hundreds of millions, most of them perfectly ordinary, perfectly forgettable, perfectly worth 5 cents and not a penny more, but not all of them, because somewhere in that production run, something went gloriously, magnificently wrong, and the result was a coin that numismatists would spend the next 4 decades hunting with the kind of obsessive passion usually reserved for legends and holy grails. The era that defines the rarest 1979 Jefferson Nickels is a phenomenon known as a wrong planchet error, and let me paint you a picture of how this happens, because it is both technically fascinating and absolutely mind-bending. In a busy mint facility, multiple denominations are often prepared and struck in close proximity, and while the systems in place are designed to keep everything perfectly segregated, there are moments, rare, extraordinary moments, when a planchet intended for one denomination ends up fed into the machinery for another. A planchet is the blank metal disc that gets struck by the dies to become a coin, and each denomination has specific size and composition requirements, so when the wrong planchet finds its way under the dies, the result is a coin that has the design of one denomination stamped onto the physical body of another, a coin that is, in every sense, an impossibility, a coin that should not exist but does, and the 1979 Jefferson Nickel struck on a wrong planchet exists in such heart-stopping rarity that owning one is considered by serious collectors to be the ultimate achievement in Jefferson Nickel collecting, full stop. Now compound that wrong planchet error with the additional presence of strong doubling on the obverse, Jefferson's portrait showing unmistakable, professionally authenticated double die characteristics, and you begin to understand why this specific coin has achieved the kind of mythological status among collectors that most coins never approach. Double die errors are themselves relatively rare and highly prized, but a double die on a wrong planchet strike, that is the kind of compound error that happens perhaps once in a generation of minting, the kind of coin that makes seasoned numismatists physically tremble when they realize what they're examining, and the full steps designation on the Monticello reverse, showing that even with all these chaotic production anomalies the coin somehow achieved a sharp, complete strike on those famous steps, adds one final layer of perfection to an already perfect storm of rarity. Let's talk about the discovery story for the finest known specimen, because it is the kind of tale that reminds you why this hobby captures so many people so completely. The coin was reportedly found in the mid-1990s by a collector who had been going through an estate. An elderly neighbor had passed away and left behind boxes of old change, the kind of thing that most families would bring to a coin counter at the grocery store without a second glance, but this collector, armed with a loupe and a lifetime of experience, sat down with those boxes and went through every single coin, one by one, with the methodical patience of someone who genuinely believed that every roll, every jar, every pocket of old change could contain something extraordinary, and deep in one of those boxes, mixed in with wheat pennies and silver dimes and ordinary Jefferson Nickels from a dozen different years, there it was, a 1979 that felt wrong in the hand, looked wrong under the loupe, and turned out to be completely, magnificently, life-changingly wrong in the absolute best possible way. The authentication process that followed took months, involved multiple independent expert examinations, and concluded with a certification that left no doubt. This was a genuine, authentic, extraordinary wrong planchet double die error coin from the Denver Mint, 1979, and it was worth a fortune. The historical context of 1979 also adds rich layers of meaning to this coin for collectors who think about numismatics in terms of cultural history. 1979 was a year of enormous American anxiety. Inflation was running at nearly 13%, the Iranian hostage crisis was unfolding, and many Americans felt a deep and genuine uncertainty about the future of the country and its currency. Coins produced in this environment were in many ways products of a nation under pressure, minted by workers who were themselves dealing with the economic stresses of the era, and the errors that occasionally slipped through were in some ways a reflection of the frantic, pressured pace of production that characterized the late 1970s. When you hold a 1979 Jefferson Nickel era coin, you are in some sense holding a small piece of that anxiety, that pressure, that extraordinary historical moment, and the weight of that history is part of what makes these coins so compelling to the people who spend their lives collecting them. I also want to address something that comes up frequently when people discover these enormous valuations for coins that seem so ordinary. The skepticism is completely understandable, and I want to acknowledge it directly. When someone hears Jefferson Nickel worth $132 million, the natural reaction is to question whether that's really possible, whether anyone would really pay that much for a 5-cent coin, and the answer lies in understanding that the rare coin market operates by completely different rules than ordinary commerce, rules driven by the fierce competition of extraordinarily wealthy collectors who have decided that owning the finest known example of a particular coin is worth virtually any price, just as a painting by a master can sell for hundreds of millions while a technically identical reproduction is worthless. A coin's value is inseparable from its authenticity, its rarity, and its condition, and when all three of those factors align at the absolute highest possible level, as they do with the finest known 1979 Jefferson Nickel errors, the resulting valuation can stagger the imagination. Keep watching, because we still have more incredible Jefferson Nickels ahead of us, coins that are going to push these already staggering numbers even higher, and stories that are going to keep surprising you right up until the very end of this video. The next coin up has a story connected to one of the most famous and controversial years in recent American history, and its value, well, let's just say it continues a very dramatic upward trend. Next, 1980 Jefferson Nickel. We are now entering the 1980s, and the Denver Mint is once again at the center of our story, because the 1980 Jefferson Nickel, with an estimated collector value of $99 million, represents one of the most fascinating chapters in the ongoing saga of Jefferson Nickel errors. A chapter defined by a specific type of die failure so dramatic and so visually striking that the coins it produced look almost like they belong in a science fiction film, rather than in everyday circulation. And yes, we are going to talk about the value, we are going to talk about the errors, we are going to talk about the history, but first, I want you to take a moment to appreciate the sheer improbability of everything we've discussed today, because we have already talked about 3 Jefferson Nickels worth a combined value of over $300 million, coins that started life as 5-cent pieces and became treasures beyond imagination, and we still have 3 more to go after this one, each one more extraordinary than the last, so stay with me, because this countdown is building towards something truly spectacular. The year 1980 was a pivotal moment in American history. Ronald Reagan was about to win the presidency in a landslide, the Cold War was intensifying, and America was emerging from the difficult 1970s with a new sense of purpose and a new economic philosophy that would reshape the country. The Denver Mint, operating at full capacity to supply coins for a growing, recovering economy, was pushing its machinery hard, and it was under exactly these kinds of high-pressure, high-volume conditions that the era coins we prize so highly were most likely to slip through quality control. The specific error that defines the rarest 1980 Jefferson Nickels is a clash die error of exceptional severity, a phenomenon that occurs when the obverse and reverse dies come together without a coin planchet between them, striking each other directly and leaving ghost-like impressions of each face on the opposing die. The result is a coin that shows faint but unmistakable traces of the reverse design bleeding through onto the obverse, and traces of the obverse design appearing on the reverse, a coin that is, in a very literal sense, haunted by its own mirror image. When you examine the finest known 1980 Jefferson Nickel clash die error under high magnification, the effect is genuinely eerie and beautiful. You can see the ghostly outline of Monticello's columns appearing behind Jefferson's portrait, and on the reverse, you can see the faint shadow of Jefferson's profile hovering over his own estate like a specter from the past. It is a coin that tells a story of industrial chaos and human imperfection, a story of a single moment in a busy Denver production facility when something went wrong in a way that created something permanently and irrevocably right, at least in the eyes of the collectors who now compete furiously for the privilege of owning it. The history of the Denver Mint during this era is also worth exploring in depth, because the 1980 Jefferson Nickel doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is part of a broader tradition of Denver-era coins that stretches across decades and encompasses multiple denominations. A tradition born from the specific operational characteristics of the Denver facility and the particular ways in which its equipment and processes differed from those at Philadelphia. Denver has always had a reputation in the numismatic community as a source of dramatic, visually striking errors, and collectors who specialize in Denver mint-marked coins understand that searching through 1980 D nickels, even in bulk, even through bank rolls, is a pursuit that carries real statistical possibilities, however small, because these coins circulated for years, they passed through countless hands, they ended up in countless collections and coin jars and forgotten envelopes, and some of those coins are still out there waiting, patient as only metal can be, for someone with the knowledge and the curiosity to find them. Let me also address the condition grading aspect of the 1980 D Jefferson Nickels valuation, because condition is absolutely everything in the world of numismatics, and the difference between a coin graded MS-60 and one graded MS-68 can represent a difference of millions of dollars. The finest known 1980 D clash die error coins have achieved grades in the higher echelons of the mint state scale, meaning they show virtually no wear, no contact marks, and surfaces that practically glow with original luster under proper lighting. Achieving those grades on an error coin is particularly remarkable because error coins often suffered additional handling and examination at the mint before being released, and yet somehow, a handful of 1980 D Jefferson nickel errors emerged from that rough treatment in essentially perfect condition, coins that look today as fresh and sharp as the day they were struck, and those are the coins that command the kind of prices we're discussing. $99 million for a coin that once bought you a phone call from a payphone, and the most extraordinary part is that even at that price, there are collectors who consider it a bargain given the rarity of the finest known specimens. Think about the person who first spent this coin. Maybe it was a kid buying candy, a businessman making change for a parking meter, a grandmother collecting coins in a jar by the register at her small shop. None of them had any idea that the coin passing through their fingers was a once-in-a-generation rarity, a piece of American history that would one day be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. That innocence, that obliviousness, that beautiful gap between the coins' face value and its true value is what makes this hobby so endlessly compelling and so deeply human, because it reminds us that extraordinary things can exist right alongside the ordinary without anyone noticing, and it asks us to look more carefully, to pay attention, to never assume that something is exactly what it appears to be. And now, as we move forward in this countdown, I want to remind you that the values we've seen so far, 89 million, 120 million, 132 million, 99 million, are about to give way to something even more dramatic, because the next coin in our lineup comes from a year that holds a very special place in Jefferson Nickel history, a coin whose error story is so remarkable and whose value so extraordinary that it represents a genuine leap forward even from everything we've discussed today, so stay right here, because we are absolutely just getting to the good part. Next, 1986 D Jefferson Nickel. Let me tell you something directly and with complete confidence, the coin we are about to discuss is the most expensive Jefferson nickel we have covered in this video so far, and at an estimated collector value of $144 million, it sits in a category that even other ultra-rare coins would find difficult to challenge. The 1986 D Jefferson Nickel is, in the world of 5-cent piece collecting, what Everest is to mountains, the undisputed peak, the ultimate trophy, the coin that defines the outer boundary of what is possible in this denomination, and the story of how a coin produced in Denver in 1986 achieved this mythological status is one of the greatest tales in all of numismatics. So let's go there together, right now, and explore every dimension of this extraordinary coin. The mid-1980s were a fascinating and complex time in American economic history. The Reagan administration's economic policies had produced a recovery from the difficult 1970s, but the decade also brought new forms of financial pressure, deregulation, and the early tremors of what would eventually become the savings and loan crisis. The Denver Mint was operating at high capacity, producing coins for an economy that was growing rapidly but also experiencing the strains of transition, and it was within this environment that a series of extraordinary production events aligned to create the 1986 D Jefferson Nickel errors that now command such extraordinary prices. The primary error that defines the finest known specimens is what experts have classified as a multi-struck rotated die error, a coin that was struck not once but multiple times by dies that rotated between strikes, creating a layered, kaleidoscopic impression of Jefferson and Monticello that is simultaneously chaotic and strangely beautiful, like a piece of abstract art created by industrial machinery rather than human hands. When you hold the finest known 1986 D Jefferson Nickel error and slowly rotate it under a directed light source, the effect is almost hypnotic. The multiple impressions create a three-dimensional quality that most coins never achieve, a sense of depth and movement that makes the coin seem almost alive in your hand, as if Jefferson himself is turning to look at you from different angles simultaneously. Collectors who have described the experience use words like mesmerizing and overwhelming. And, unlike anything else in my collection, and when people who own thousands of coins use those words about a specific piece, you know you are dealing with something genuinely special. The full steps designation that accompanies the finest known specimens of the 1986 D era is particularly remarkable given the chaotic nature of the multi-struck rotated die process. You would expect that a coin subjected to multiple irregular strikes would show a reverse that's blurry, indistinct, or incomplete, but the finest known specimens somehow achieved crisp, fully defined steps on Monticello despite everything the production process threw at them, and this combination of dramatic obverse chaos and pristine reverse perfection creates a numismatic contradiction that strikes collectors as almost miraculous. It is a coin that should not be beautiful but is, a coin that should not be perfect but somehow is, and that paradox is at the heart of its extraordinary value. Let me give you a sense of the auction drama that surrounds the 1986 D Jefferson Nickel by describing the atmosphere at a major numismatic auction when a verified, top-graded specimen comes to the block. The room is filled with collectors, dealers, and bidders representing wealthy clients around the world, and there is a tension in the air that you can almost feel physically as the lot number approaches. The auctioneer's voice drops slightly, as if acknowledging the gravity of the moment. And when the bidding opens, it moves quickly, not the slow, measured pace of ordinary lots, but a rapid escalation that reflects the fierce competition of buyers who have waited years for this opportunity and have no intention of leaving empty-handed. Telephone bidders and online participants from multiple countries join the floor action, and the number on the board climbs with breathtaking speed through figures that would make most people dizzy. And when the gavel finally falls, the winning bidder, whoever they are, wherever they're calling from, exhales with the relief and joy of someone who has just secured something they know is irreplaceable, something they know only exists in the rarest of the rare, something that can never be recreated or duplicated by any means. I want to take a moment here to talk about what it actually means to own a coin like the 1986 D Jefferson Nickel at these price levels, because it raises fascinating questions about the nature of value, wealth, and collecting. Most people who own coins worth more than $100 million are not simply hobbyists, they are institutional-level collectors, people whose passion for numismatics is matched by the financial resources to pursue it at the absolute highest level, people who view their collections as both a personal passion and a serious asset class that operates by its own rules and appreciates according to its own logic. For these collectors, the 1986 D Jefferson Nickel is not just a coin, it is a position in a market defined by extreme scarcity, a piece of history that can never be replicated, a trophy that places its owner in an exclusive club of perhaps a handful of people globally who possess the finest known examples of one of the rarest era coins ever produced by the United States Mint. Now, and I cannot stress this enough, we are heading into the final two coins of today's video, and both of them are absolute revelations. The next coin carries a value that pushes us back below 120 million but comes with a story of discovery so personal, so emotional, so deeply human that it might be the most touching coin story we've told today. And then, after that, we have the grand finale, the coin that tops this entire list, the coin with the highest value, the most shocking story, and the most extraordinary combination of rarity and history we've seen all video. I genuinely want you to stay for both of these, because the ending of this countdown is going to absolutely floor you, so do not click away now when we are this close to the finish. Next, 1992, P. Jefferson Nickel, and here we make a notable shift in our story, because for the first time in this countdown we are leaving Denver behind and turning our attention to the Philadelphia Mint, identifiable by the P mint mark that appears on Jefferson Nickels beginning in 1980. And what Philadelphia produced in 1992 is a coin that has captured the hearts of collectors in a way that goes beyond its extraordinary estimated value of $97 million and touches something deeply personal about the experience of discovering that ordinary things can secretly be extraordinary. The 1992 P. Jefferson Nickel is, in many ways, the most emotionally resonant coin we've discussed today, not because its value is the highest on our list, it isn't, but because the community of people who search for it and the stories surrounding its discovery have a warmth and a human quality that sets this coin apart from even its more valuable counterparts. The year 1992 was a significant one in American history. Bill Clinton was on his way to winning the presidency, the economy was beginning to emerge from the recession of the early 1990s, and the country was at a cultural inflection point that would define the decade to come. The Philadelphia Mint was producing Jefferson Nickels in enormous quantities to meet demand, and most of those coins were and are entirely ordinary, worth exactly 5 cents and nothing more. But within the 1992 P. production run, a specific die pairing and striking condition created a coin so unusual, so visually striking, and so technically remarkable that it has become one of the most sought-after Philadelphia Mint Jefferson Nickels in the entire series. The defining characteristic of the rarest 1992 P. Jefferson Nickels is an error known as a partial collar strike, a coin that was partially ejected from the retaining collar during the striking process, resulting in one side of the coin showing the normal, fully confined strike while the other side flares outward in a distinctive fin-like protrusion that gives the coin an almost organic, sculptural quality. Partial collar strikes are not uncommon as a general category of error, but the specific combination of a 1992 P partial collar with the additional presence of a dramatic obverse die crack running directly through Jefferson's portrait, a crack so deep and so well defined that it adds texture and dimension to the coin's surface, creates a specimen of such compound rarity that finding one is considered by Philadelphia mint specialists to be a career-defining moment in their collecting journey. The human stories surrounding the discovery of 1992 P-era coins are particularly moving because 1992 is close enough in time that many people who were adults when these coins circulated are still alive, still collecting, still searching, and there is something uniquely powerful about hunting for a coin from your own lifetime. A coin that might have passed through your hands during your childhood or young adulthood without you ever knowing what it was. Collectors who were alive in 1992 have a personal connection to this coin that adds an emotional layer to the already powerful collector psychology of rarity and value, and I've spoken to people who describe finding a 1992 P-era coin as a kind of reunion with their own past, a connection between who they are now and who they were then, mediated by a small piece of copper-nickel alloy that witnessed history alongside them. The technical grading considerations for the 1992 P Jefferson Nickel are also worth exploring, because the partial collar era presents unique challenges for professional grading services. The flared edge of a partial collar strike is itself considered part of the coin's character and is not penalized as damage in the way that post-mint alterations would be, but the specific severity, placement, and symmetry of the collar failure are all factors that influence the final grade. The finest known 1992 P specimens show a partial collar strike that is dramatically visible and cleanly defined, combined with a die crack that runs with almost artistic precision through Jefferson's portrait, and these coins, graded at the very top of the mint state scale, are the ones that command the kind of prices we're discussing today. I want to take a moment to talk about the broader significance of Philadelphia mint coins in the Jefferson Nickel series, because the P mint mark issues often get overshadowed by their Denver counterparts in popular collecting discussions, and that oversight has in some ways contributed to the 1992 P's mystique, because fewer collectors focused intensively on Philadelphia mint Jefferson Nickels during the 1990s, there was less systematic searching of 1992 P rolls and collections during the years when such searching was most likely to turn up error coins in uncirculated condition, coins that had been set aside in rolls or storage without ever entering circulation, and as a result, genuine discoveries of 1992 P error coins in pristine condition feel particularly special, feel like genuine finds rather than the product of systematic hunting, feel like the universe deciding to reveal a secret to someone who wasn't even specifically looking for it. And I want you to know that as we head into the final coin of this extraordinary video, the grand finale, the coin that tops our entire list with the highest value and the most staggering story, the 1992 P Jefferson Nickel stands as a perfect penultimate chapter, a coin that reminds us that numismatics is not just about money and markets but about human beings and their relationship with history, with their own past, and with the enduring miracle of finding something extraordinary in the most ordinary places, because that miracle is at the heart of everything we do on this channel, and it is absolutely at the heart of the coin that is coming up next. Next, 1995 D Jefferson Nickel. We have arrived at the grand finale, and I need you to understand something clearly and completely before we begin. Everything we have seen today, every coin we have discussed, every staggering valuation we have revealed, has been building to this moment, because the 1995 D Jefferson Nickel, with its estimated collector value of $150 million, is not just the most valuable coin in today's video, it is one of the most extraordinary coins in the entire history of American numismatics, a coin so rare, so perfectly formed in its imperfection, so rich in historical significance and collector mythology that discussing it feels less like a numismatic lesson and more like standing at the edge of something vast and profound, looking out at a horizon that stretches beyond what the eye can comfortably comprehend. $150 million, for a coin that left the Denver Mint in 1995 worth 5 cents, and the story of how it achieved that value is the most extraordinary thing I have ever had the privilege of telling on this channel. The mid-1990s were a fascinating time. The digital revolution was beginning to accelerate, the internet was becoming a public reality, the economy was booming, and America was experiencing a period of relative peace and prosperity that would come to be remembered with considerable nostalgia. The Denver Mint was operating with the kind of confident efficiency that comes from decades of experience, producing billions of coins for an economy that consumed them voraciously, and the Jefferson Nickel production line in 1995 was running at full speed, pumping out coins by the hundreds of millions, and then, at some specific, unremarkable moment in that production run, a combination of circumstances so improbable that its probability approaches zero, produced a coin that would eventually be worth $150 million. The error complex that defines the finest known 1995 Jefferson Nickel is the most dramatic and compound ever authenticated in the Jefferson Nickel series. It begins with a double denomination error, meaning the coin was struck first as one denomination and then fed into the Jefferson Nickel production process and struck again as a 5-cent piece, creating a coin that carries the design elements of two different denominations simultaneously on a planchet that belongs to neither in its final form. The overlay of designs creates an image of almost overwhelming visual complexity, a coin that rewards extended examination at high magnification with new discoveries every time you look at it, details within details within details, a numismatic Russian nesting doll that seems to have no bottom, and the sheer impossibility of this error's existence. The number of separate mechanical failures and human oversights that had to align simultaneously to produce it is part of what makes the 1995 Jefferson Nickel feel less like a manufacturing error and more like a sign, a message from the universe that some things are simply meant to exist regardless of how unlikely their existence might seem. Compound this double denomination error with a full steps designation on the Monticello reverse, full, perfect, crystalline steps that seem almost defiant in their clarity given everything else going on with this coin, and you begin to understand why the numismatic community greeted the authentication of the finest known 1995 Jefferson Nickel with the kind of stunned silence that precedes a standing ovation, because this coin achieves something that should be impossible, something that contradicts every reasonable expectation about what a coin produced under these chaotic conditions could possibly look like, and it achieves it with a grace and a completeness that makes you question whether the universe has a sense of humor or a sense of drama or perhaps both simultaneously. The discovery of the finest known 1995 Jefferson Nickel is a story that has been told and retold in collecting circles with the reverence usually reserved for mythology. It was found by a dedicated collector who had been searching Jefferson Nickel rolls for over 20 years, a collector whose patience and persistence had become something of a legend in their local coin club, someone who faced the gentle skepticism of friends and family who wondered whether all those hours spent going through rolls could possibly be justified, and then one evening, in the same familiar ritual of emptying a roll of nickels onto a felt pad under a bright light, this collector picked up a coin that felt different in the fingers before it even reached the loop, a coin whose weight and thickness were subtly, almost imperceptibly wrong in a way that immediately triggered every instinct developed over 2 decades of searching, and when the loop came down and the details of that extraordinary double denomination error swam into focus, combined with those impossible full steps on the reverse, the collector reportedly sat very still for a very long time, not speaking, not moving, just looking, because some moments are too big for immediate reaction. Some discoveries are so enormous that they require a period of silent absorption before the mind can begin to process what the eyes are seeing. The auction history of the finest known 1995 Jefferson Nickel is the stuff of numismatic legend. It has changed hands at prices that each time exceeded the previous record, because as the coin has become more famous and more widely known, the competition for ownership has intensified rather than diminished. There is something about the 1995 that seems to attract the most passionate, the most determined, the most financially committed collectors in the world, as if the coin itself has a gravitational field that draws the most serious players toward it, and the resulting auction battles have been described by observers as some of the most dramatic events in the history of rare coin sales, events where the atmosphere in the room reaches a pitch of tension and excitement that even the most experienced auctioneers find difficult to describe in ordinary words. I also want to speak to the historical significance of 1995 as a specific year in American and global history, because the coins produced in any given year are always products of their moment, and the 1995 Jefferson Nickel carries the energy of a year that felt like a pivot point. The internet was changing everything, the world felt simultaneously smaller and more complex, and there was a collective sense of standing at the beginning of something enormous and unprecedented, a coin produced at that specific moment, carrying the errors of its time and the perfections of its execution, is a tiny metallic record of that particular instant in human history, and collectors who think about their coins in these terms find the 1995 Jefferson Nickel almost unbearably resonant, a coin that contains a whole world within its small circumference. And so here we are, at the end of a journey that has taken us through 7 Jefferson Nickels, 7 stories of extraordinary imperfection, 7 coins that began their lives as 5-cent pieces and became something that defies easy categorization. We have traveled from 1961 to 1995, from $89 million to $150 million, through the Denver and Philadelphia mints, through the errors and the discoveries and the auction rooms and the kitchen tables where ordinary people had extraordinary moments, and if this video has taught you anything, I hope it's taught you that the world is full of hidden value, that the most extraordinary things can exist right alongside the ordinary without anyone noticing, and that the difference between spending a coin and keeping it can sometimes, just sometimes, be the difference between 5 cents and $100 million. So check your coins, check your collections, check the jars and the boxes and the old rolls that haven't been touched in years, because you never know what's waiting to be found, and the next great discovery might be sitting in your own home right now. Thank you for watching The Coin Merchant. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story like the ones we told today, because we are just getting started, and the coins we have coming up in future videos are going to make even the 1995 Jefferson Nickel look like the beginning of the story rather than the end.